students. So I'm here at my house today, and I want to get through the rest of the notes on the other senses. So far today, or so far in the last few days, we've discussed most of them at length, and today I want to finish up on our sense of smell. Now, actually, we even talked about this somewhat in class, how our smell is like the oldest of our senses, and it's the only one of our five senses that is not routed through the thalamus. You know, all other four, all those sensory receptors are routed through the thalamus. But in our smell, they are not. We have, relatively few amount of receptor cells. Remember when we were talking about vision, our ganglion cells can process like 1 million receptor cells, have 1 million receptor cells that they can process information at once. Our olfactory bulbs actually really only have about 100. And so, comparatively speaking to other mammals, humans don't have a real great sense of smell. But it is our oldest. And what the receptors do that they connect in up our nasal passages to this little area called the olfactory bulb. And that sends the information onto the back of or onto the brain to areas first in the limbic system, first to the amygdala, if you remember the amygdala, and then to the hippocampus. And that's why scents are such an emotional trigger for us, that they bring us back. They help us remember. And so, the while our sense of smell might be one of those that we talked about in class, like, yeah, I'd be willing to give that up, it does have a strong emotional connection. So let's talk a little bit about our taste buds. Unfortunately, this is one of those things that has to get cut at this time. Just because of time, it's a kind of a fun little experiment to do. But when we talk about our taste buds, and I'm not going to show you my tongue, but we talk about our taste buds and we're talking about what's called papilla. Now, they're not just on our tongue. We have taste buds on the roof of our mouth, on our cheeks, on different areas, but most of them are on our tongue. And they kind of, if I showed you like a tongue, maybe like a diagram, I'm not going to show you mine because it's weird and ugh, and talk about being less than too close for comfort. But we have these five senses. So, for instance, on the tip of our tongue, that's where we sense sweet. We have salty, sour, bitter. Bitter is more toward the back of our tongue, like toward our throat. And then we have this sense called umami. And I even put a picture here. I brought it here with me. This is my umami seasoning. It is fantastic. And if you don't know what umami is, it's kind of like this whole mouth feel. If you've ever eaten a really juicy steak, you kind of understand how it just kind of fills your mouth, especially if you've eaten a real nice juicy steak with like butter on it or something really going over the top. The umami sense is right in the center of our tongue, and it's just one of those really unctuous, rich kind of tastes. It's not sweet, it's not salty, so it's just mommy is like, mommy. Anyway, but people differ in our ability to taste food. Now, I'll give you a little example when we look at the next slide that I kind of input here. But if you were to look at your own tongue or somebody else's tongue, you could actually measure and see how closely packed the papilla are on their tongue. The more closely packed or densely, tightly packed the papilla are, the stronger or the more intense food flavors are to you. So if you're one of those people who don't really like strong tasting foods, like you don't like broccoli, or you cannot stand the taste of like coffee or some of those things that you're like, I don't know how people can eat that. It's not because you're not adventurous or whatever it might be, because you're just a picky eater. Maybe it's because of your papilla that they absorb too much chemical and it makes the food taste bad, kind of taste not good. So this is I'm just going to move this over a little bit. If we were in class, we would be able to do a little bit more with this, but that part right there says papilla density. Again, if you're somewhere in the middle of a normal taster, maybe this is you, but kind of predict where you would be. Are you a super taster, a hypo taster, or somewhere in the middle? Super tasters tend to be more women than they do men, but that's one of those more general distributions. Things like coffee. People who are super tasters, they don't really like coffee. If they drink coffee, they add a lot of cream and sugar. Like I have a niece who her name's Gabby, and we always tease her. We're like, Gabby, would you like some coffee with your cream? Because she puts like this much coffee and like this much cream. So she likes coffee, but she actually doesn't really like the taste of coffee. She likes the taste of creamer with a little bit of coffee. They love salty things, spicy things, hot things, like peppery, even like too much pepper from table pepper. They don't really even like that. They avoid that. They don't have a much acquired taste. Anything like alcohol like doesn't taste good. In fact, it tastes like jet fuel, like really burns to them. And they're kind of a picky eater. They're not very open to trying new experiences. If you are a super taster, chances are you're not going to be the first one to be like, "Hey, let's go to sushi," because that just would freak you out. That is not up your alley. Then you, on the other side of the spectrum, have hypotasters. I'm a hypotaster. I'm a big time hypotaster. I have very widely spaced papilla. Again, I can't help it. I love black coffee. I actually do kind of like salt, where it says it's indifferent for a hypotaster. I 100% seek out spicy food. Like I go on a mission to find it. You walk into my house, remember when we were telling about like everybody's house has a scent? You walk in and like you smelled probably garlic, more or less, and probably like curry or some real strong because I love them. The rest of my family, luckily, or at least the ones I cook for now, are pretty much normal or hypo tasters. Our oldest son is like a super taster, and so he was a very like picky eater. So him, it was hard to kind of cook for people who are, if you are like the chef of the family, cooking for one side or the other. If you're all normal tasters, yay you, you can all probably agree on where you go out to eat or what's for dinner that night. So this is just an idea of how our taste buds work and things like that. All right, so unfortunately, like I said, we do a fun little experiment in class. Can't do it this year, but it's not the end of the world. You get the idea of a super and a hypo taster, and then somewhere in the middle for everybody else. Okay, and now let's talk about touch. Now, when we did talk about our senses the other day, at least in class, I hope you were thinking about like what sense you might be willing to give up. And a lot of people said like their sense of taste, but probably not their sense of touch, which is a really good thing because we need, in fact, evolutionarily speaking, we need our sense of touch. Well, we need all of our sense of touch or all of our senses, but um, our brain interprets the sensation. Remember our neuron dance? Remember when we're like bringing in all that sensation from all over? Our brain interprets, for instance, the temperature, if our skin gets pierced, if we step on something, as the amount of the intensity. So it basically says how much of your brain function is going to be devoted to whatever that touch is. And I do have to say that our sense of touch is somewhat culturally related, means sometimes people are more sensitive than others culturally. The idea of boys don't cry. That's a cultural thing where it might hurt, but you can't show that it hurts. And there are some areas or tribal groups that they don't allow their babies to cry. Partly it was to hide and to kind of keep away from enemies who might be lurking. But that's a really important kind of understanding that you cannot cry out in pain. It's also a bit of our physiology. Maybe you have a high threshold for pain because that's kind of like a genetic thing that's been passed down. It's also a bit of our attention. Now think about this. Remember when we were talking about endorphins? Let's say that you are in a big play or in the heat of the moment or something of, fleeing from an accident or trying to get away from something that is dangerous. Your attention might not be directed on the pain, on whatever sensation that you're feeling is. Now, maybe later, but that's because those endorphins are kind of helping you. We talk a little bit about like childbirth and how that works. So your brain is going to interpret the pain. But it also depends on other things. And part of it is what we call the gate control theory. So remember when, again, we were talking about endorphins last chapter. Well, let's say for instance, and I think of the gate control theory as is literally like a gate where, you know, the sensation, the sensory neurons send it up your brain, up your spinal cord to your brain in the interneurons. Well, once your brain receives that information of pain, endorphins are going to then kind of kick in, if you will, and help swing that door shut. And so think of it here. Put it this way. So like the touch receptors are being opened, right? And so those interneurons are allowed to go up your brain, up your spinal cord to your brain. But once that information gets to your brain will then actually send out the chemicals that will help to kind of close that door so you don't keep feeling the pain. Now, if when we're talking intensity, you have to feel pain to a certain level, but the endorphins will help kind of ease that pain and close the gate, if you will. So I do want you to understand that your brain kind of interprets the intensity and then therefore sends out the chemical or the signal to ease the pain. Now, it's not going to take away all the pain. You know, like think about it when you were a little kid and you know, like when mom kissed the boo boo, like when, oh honey, are you okay, let's kiss it. That's kind of the same idea where it helps ease the pain. I don't think it does. Well, actually it does. Psychologically it does. But keep some of these things in mind. The pain is still there. Your brain interprets it as the amount of intensity it is having to deal with. Okay, so last bit then. When we're talking about touch and things, we understand this sensation in a couple of different ways. One, through the vestibular sense, and both of these are, well, they're in different parts of the brain. So let's first talk about the vestibular sense. This is how our body is oriented in space. This is how we know our head is here and our feet are here on the ground. And we understand that gravity works that way. Like what goes up must come down. That's why I hate roller coasters. Like, ugh, that makes my stomach like, oh, churn. And part of it has to do with my semicircular canals in my ear. We're going to talk a lot more about semicircular canals and what's happening there, like these little, almost like these little crystals that are happening in your ear. And when you're doing, say, like a flip, for instance, how your body gets oriented, and if those like these little crystals kind of shift a little. So if you're looking at that picture there, that is, wow, an incredible picture. How do gymnasts and tumblers and things like that, how do they know which way is up? How do they know how to land their feet? Well, part of that is because they have this natural ability, and some of it is just the basic understanding of their vestibular sense. They get here's up and here's down, and they understand where their head is in relation to the ground. So it helps us think about how our head is moving, and like I said, think about how you do a flip and things like that. I could give you a little tutorial. Actually, maybe we will. We'll do it like right now. So our kinesthetic sense is our feedback about the position and the orientation of our individual body parts. So before we even talk about this one, okay, we're just gonna do it. All right, we're just gonna do it. Join along with me if you will. You know, I don't have a problem like making a fool of myself. So think about, can you stand with your foot like one, you can't see me. Stand with your one leg, like, you know, up. Can you stand there for 20 seconds? And then can you close your eyes and stand there for 20 seconds without like falling over? And then like turn around 4 times and then try it again. Oh, yep. Okay, I'm actually already falling over. So this is how our vestibular sense is understanding, because like already those semicircular canals were getting like disoriented, and it was going to take a while for my brain to understand where my body position is at. So then we talk about the kinesthetic sense, and that's giving us feedback. So for instance, I like to use basketball in this case. How do basketball players know how to at the same time put their arm up and jump and then push the ball into the hoop? Like that's not necessarily a natural ability for everybody. And so think about going up for a layup or going up for a dunk. That feedback is how you jump, when you time it, how you like hold your hands to put yourself into. So it's all about movement. Think about it maybe even in volleyball, about how you're coming up to do that spike. Really, any type of dance, if you're in dance, um, any kind of sport that involves movement, you understand the kinesthetic sense, this kind of orientation of your individual body parts. What I do think I can connect for you are people who do yoga. When you do yoga, think about how you have to focus on like a body part. And actually, you're probably focusing on many body parts, but you're trying to hold like one. So think of if you see that picture there, and if you've ever done yoga, like, or there's one that I haven't done yoga in a few months, but like there's a move that is called like eagle pose. There, trying to get my hands out. Like I can do it better if I like tried at it. But this is how your like muscles and joints are moving. So the kinesthetic sense is all about movement. All right, so that's really actually it for the day. And the next time we meet, we're going to start on perception, which is kind of just a continuation of sensation, but really fun, really great stuff in that one. So talk to you later. Bye.